We'd like to welcome you to the annual Oweida Lecture in Journalism and Ethics. My name is Walter Middlebrook. I'm a Foster Professor of Practice in the Belisario College of Communications. The department is pleased to host this annual event that brings leading figures from journalism and academia to campus to discuss news ethics. The Oweida Lecture fits beautifully within the College of Communications overarching curriculum, programming, and research emphasis on ethics and mass communication. In other words, we're striving always to do the right thing. Our college puts a premium on teaching ethics. We want our students to understand that being a great journalist requires more than being a dogged reporter, a compelling writer, the fastest tweeter, or a great videographer. Journalists have a moral responsibility to be honest, accurate, and free of bias to sources, to consumers of news, and to society as a whole. Tonight's presentation is the college's premier event when it comes to teaching news ethics, news media. 2 decades ago, Dave Oweida endowed this lecture in memory of her husband, Dr. Nick Oweida, who came to the United States from Lebanon in 1950. He set up what would become a successful medical practice in New Kensington, Pennsylvania. Dr. Oweida built an outstanding reputation and was elected president of the medical staff of the local hospital, only to have that reputation tarnished when a newspaper recklessly suggested that he had not shown good judgment, had performed unnecessary surgery, and had made incorrect diagnoses. Dr. Oweida sued to restore his reputation, and he was successful. His wife, Peg, decided to establish this lecture series so that the Penn State community could learn more about the importance of ethics. We used this occasion to stay focused on that mission. Despite the growing number of reported lapses by journalists, professionals acting unethically by lying, cheating, stealing, or publishing stories without checking facts, by invading people's privacy, or simply being unfair, we are to be reminded that the majority of America's news media have never been more ethically responsible. Media outlets today employ some of the best educated, most conscientious journalists in history. And they are dedicated to holding introspective conversations about how the news should be reported in an ethical manner. Tonight's speaker came through the ranks to lead and manage a number of journalists and newsrooms through a myriad of ethical dilemmas. Our speaker, Don Hudson, retired from Newsday in November 2024 after serving as the organization's editor from 2022 and its assistant managing editor of specialty topics beginning in 2018. During his tenure, Don led the company's COVID coverage and watched the staff of more than 250 win an unprecedented number of awards. He has helped transform and change the culture of that organization through digital, TV, and investigations and enterprise reporting. Hudson earned a bachelor's degree in radio and television from the University of Louisiana at Monroe, and then worked as a reporter and editor at various publications. His career included positions at the Orlando Sentinel, followed by time with the Net Company in Tennessee, Michigan, and Mississippi, where he contributed to civil rights coverage that was named as a finalist for Pulitzer Prize. For his presentation tonight, he has chosen the topic, how to avoid ethical dilemmas. After his remarks, we'll ask you to join us in question and answer session, and we'll have some microphones set up to be used by you. But at this moment, I'd like for you to join me and give a big "We Are Welcome" to Don Hudson.
Make sure everyone can hear me. Everyone good in the back with the mic? Great. Well, first off, it's an honor to be here and to be a part of the Penn State community and journalism community, because anytime I can speak about journalism, quite honestly, I get excited. And there was a gentleman once, he was managing editor at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, that I admired him for his enthusiasm. He came from the feature side, and but we all kind of wondered about him sometimes also too. He'd come into my boss's office, and he'd just jump on top of the desk and just start screaming. That was back in the day when you could do those things. And but he was screaming out of excitement to get us excited about journalism. Took me a while to figure that out, but you know, he picked his spots. And that's the way I've tried to be and model myself throughout my career, is to be excited about journalism on a daily basis. And I always told folks, I said, you know, when you walk in the office every day as a journalist, you leave everything else behind. Because you have to be focused. We have to do a job that's unprecedented. In a field right now that's being challenged, left and right. Press freedoms are being challenged, left and right. And we need this group right here to step out there next and be a part of the solution. So my presentation, and I throughout my career, I've done this for 43 years as a journalist. I started back in high school, so I knew what I was going to do. Professor Middlebrook says, people don't do that, but I did. I was a sophomore in high school, and I said I was going to become a journalist. I said by age 25, I was going to become an editor, and I was. And I worked at it, and I kept working at it in different places, and I kept growing and learning because I wanted to hone my craft. When someone would come back and critique my work, we had a red board back in the day. You'd have some editors who would just mark your stories up left and right. And if you didn't have tough skin, you would go home crying that day. I would go up there and myself personally and write down these suggestions that the editor would make. So I was taking an opportunity to learn. And actually, he noticed me up there doing that one day. He pulled me to the side. He says, "You're the only one in the newsroom who actually comes up here and takes notes." I was doing it to learn. So, all right, now we're going to move on with the presentation. I wanted to show you also, too, the print edition of where I worked, Newsday tab. Very good work. Newsroom of more than 200 people. And I want to show you a little bit first of a little bit about Newsday.
We've got a full schedule of high school football this weekend. Hi, I'm Greg Satter.
And I'm Carissa Kelman. I'm Nancy Egland.
I'm Ken Buffa.
I'm Jasmine Anderson. Thank you so much for watching us this morning. We'll leave you with a look at your hyper-local 7-day forecast.
What you see is a total multimedia operation, the new age of it. And we had to break down a lot of walls. We brought in TV, we integrated TV. We have a state-of-the-art TV studio there. With anchors, we're doing 4 newscasts a day. Now they've cut back to 2, 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. Showcasing the talent on the staff, print and digital. Showcasing reporters. What you saw in there is you saw anchors in there actually interviewing some of the reporters on staff about their enterprise, about their stories. Then they would send reporters out actually to do pieces on it. Or you would have reporters who had turned into multimedia journalists. Also, too, that's what I'm saying. You have to have a different skill set nowadays in journalism to be successful. So I want you guys to think about that. It's all about multimedia. It's about multiple platforms across the board. Next, I want to get into the presentation, and I borrowed this from the Penn State undergrad bulletin. So I'm sure you guys are familiar with this, but this is the true definition of ethics, in my opinion. It's all about telling the truth. You report it out. It's about accuracy, of course, fairness, balanced. We talk about that. We talk about that every single day. And is it clear? And do we have diversity in coverage and diversity in sources. Because reporters have a tendency actually to want to go to the same well all the time. When you develop those sources, you want to kind of stick with them instead of stepping outside the box and developing more sources. And that's what we always used to do at Newsday and every organization I've worked for. Get out and meet other people. Sorry, did you need a seat?
Oh, no, I'm just standing.
Okay, sorry.
This will take a very good-
Okay. All right. That you'll see in confidential settlements is a Newsday investigation I was part of when I first got there in 2018, and it took 4 years to complete. And it ended up being a really, really a strong award winner for us, where we looked at teacher discipline across Long Island. Now, what I'm going to do next is that I'm going to talk to you guys about some of the ethical dilemmas that I've faced throughout my career. So I will warn you that I have to be a little vague because some of these were personnel issues. And so I can't give away, of course, names or anything. So I'm going to try to be as sensitive as I possibly can. So you guys just bear with me. But the reason I got into journalism was to inform. I started in sports. I wanted to, I finally figured out I want to right wrongs. Then I finally figured out I wanted to become the best writer. So I wanted to be able to tell stories. There are so many avenues. There are so many opportunities in journalism for you, for all of you. Not just the two basics is that you definitely have to be able to report, and you definitely have to be able to write, no matter which discipline you go into. I want you to keep that in mind. And at some point in my career, I considered it a calling. And then also, too, those competitive juices. In journalism, you have to be competitive. As you can see right there, I compared every single day. I took every publication I possibly could to see how we did against the competition. And I had to encourage other editors to do the same thing, is that we don't want to be beaten. So you need to keep that in mind, too, as a journalist. You never want to be beaten. All right, next I want to talk about some ethical dilemmas that I had to deal with, and I'm going to ask if anyone would, actually, we'll go through it here in a second, but here's the first one. And I always talk about this all the time, too, because every decision that you make, you need to make sure that it appears as if it's the last decision you're making as a journalist. That's how serious you have to take the craft on a daily basis. Everything that you touch, every story that we publish, make sure it comes across as if the last and best decision you can make as a journalist. Now, I'm going to start with this one right here because I think it's a very important one. And when do you burn a source? Because sometimes we have to use unnamed sources. This particular instance, we had a reporter who had not been in the business very long, probably, well, I shouldn't say very long. She had already been in the business about 5 years. She broke a story. It published. Then the next day, the person who had done the misdeeds called her up and said, this information is not correct. Where did you get it from? And pushed her and pushed her and pushed her and pushed her. Now, at Newsday, sources had to be approved by the editor, your direct editor, then it had to go up the ladder. It had to be approved, unnamed sources, had to be approved by the managing editor and or me. All right, so the sources, they were signed off on. This one particular source, again, gave us some good information. But when the town official called the next day to figure out where she got it from, she told the town official. What happened after that is that the source was fired immediately. We didn't find out about it until the source called us. The reporter didn't even tell us. So let me ask you guys that from an ethical dilemma standpoint. If you're an editor, what would we start? If you're a reporter, what would you have done differently? Anyone, just anyone, please. I'm gonna go get a mic because. And as an editor, what would you have done? How would you have handled that situation? Anyone? We have some really bright students in here, I know, top-notch students. So what would you have done?
This is easier said than done, but I wouldn't have burned the source.
Okay. All right, what would you have done as the editor?
I'm not sure what exactly would be standard practice. Would firing that person be standard practice for kids? Or I guess like if the person who got fired, if they're like trying to sue the paper, then like I guess it depends on if it's the outlet standard practice. It's just like if you made the mistake, you have to own up to it as a reporter. If that makes any sense.
It does.
Okay.
Anyone else? Would you have fired the reporter? Unfortunately, we did. And it was sad because the reporter was just getting started in her career. And you hate to do something like that. You hate to terminate someone because chances are they're not going to get another job again. Because the word travels. This is a small industry. All right, next thing I want to talk about. If you make it up, if you steal it, if you so-called borrow it, it's plagiarism. I said this to a group yesterday. I had a college professor to tell me that there were levels of plagiarism. So therefore, there would be levels of discipline. I said, well, I'll listen and hear you out, but I don't buy it. He said, Jason Blair is at the top of the scale. That one particular instance that we were dealing with at that particular time, he said, was lower. It's zero tolerance as far as I'm concerned. Now, I'll give you an example of something here that recently happened. There was a young reporter at a local university, and she was supposed to go out and cover this class in the activities center. She took a photographer with her. They had actually gone through the ethics class the day before. They were told to actually go check with the instructor first before you go into the classroom, check and make sure it's okay to take the photos, let them know, et cetera, and all of that. Well, they both showed up. They both took a seat. The photographer roamed around, started taking photos. The instructor finally asked the question, what are you doing? It happened to be a yoga class that was very popular, was taken off at the university. It was a whole lot of students and faculty and staff that had come. The reporters sat through the session. The photographer hung out for a little bit, and then all of a sudden they both left. And then a day or so later on the campus newspaper site, there was a story and there were photos. And it had students quoted. The students came back and told the instructor, I didn't talk to this person. The reporter made up the quotes. She took the names from the sign-in roster and used them. Made up the quotes. The photographer, what happened with the photographer is that, of course, yoga, you're in a class, it's pretty sensitive. A lot of stretches, et cetera, and all of that. A parent called after she saw the photos published, and she was concerned about her daughter's appearance. Her daughter had been bullied previously. She threatened to sue the university. The photographer didn't talk to anyone there, didn't get names. What do you guys think happened? To the reporter and to the photographer, college newspaper staff.
Get fired.
Or
They were. Ask for permission. When it's sensitive, in particular, don't make it up. Here's the other thing that happened. The reporter, the first few graphs were AI generated. Did you know? And the reason why I know this story, because for full transparency, the yoga instructor at the university was my wife. And she called me about it because her students came to her. And I was still at Newsday at the time, and I told her she needed to deal with the student publications manager, which she did. And I have since conducted a workshop at that university, and I have actually another one planned for that university. All right. Conflicts of interest. If you're involved with it, stay away from it. You shouldn't be covering it. And you should be clear with your bosses of any conflicts of interest that you have with any organizations, anything that you're doing on campus, and once you get out into the workforce as well, too. I had a young lady, she was on our entertainment desk, and she was doing some really kick-butt design, entertainment section, doing a really, really great job. But it just happened to be this local artist who was kind of blowing up, rapper. He was blowing up, and all of a sudden, I just kept noticing every week we had him in our section, and I'm going like, well, why don't we, he's not producing songs every single week, and everything. And as it turns out, and she told us about this because we would not have known otherwise. So I will give her credit for coming clean. She was having a personal relationship with him. So what do you guys think we did with her? She fired? She wasn't. She wasn't actually. But we did take her off of that publication. She learned her lesson, as some folks say, you can't help who you fall in love with. And so we didn't fault her there. She was a good employee. So we tried to do the best we possibly could, actually, because she came to us and admitted her mistake. All right, and I'll give you another quick example also, too, where you're crossing ethical lines where it appears as if you're giving someone special treatment. Again, this also goes back to entertainment. On Long Island, Billy Joel was a big deal. Everybody knows Billy Joel, right? So here's the deal. Our entertainment section, every time I turn around, Billy Joel was in our entertainment section. So I used to kid my features editor. I said, are we on the payroll? If so, how much am I going to get out of this? And he was going like, you're always saying that. Billy Joel, he's always great for metrics. He's great for metrics. I said, okay, well, that's fine. Okay, so all my editors would get on my case about that. Leave Billy Joel alone. We love the coverage about Billy. I said, okay, I get it. All good. One day, the New York Times kicked our butt on a story, and I turned around and I said, now, what has Billy got to say about that now? So things kind of changed a little bit after that, because we had become a mouthpiece for Billy Joel. And I said, hey, Billy's not the only person who grew up on Long Island. So think about that in terms of preferential treatment as you move forward in your careers. All right. How do you handle bullies? And you guys are going to run into a whole bunch of those throughout your career. And there's a lot of bullying going on right about now in the press, as you guys very well know. I can tell you how I've handled bullies in the past is that you stand up to them and you stand straight with them. I had a U.S. Senator who walked in, set up in point, powerful U.S. Senator, came in and said, do you know who I am? Yes. You set up a meeting, Senator, what can I do for you? He said, it seems like we've been having issues since you took over as editor of Newsday. And I said, well, what are the issues? He said, well, we're not getting the word out the way we used to. We used to cover this senator. He used to have news conferences every Sunday. We showed up every Sunday, wrote everything he said. And I would come back, and I wasn't the editor at the time. I would come back and question and ask the question, okay, we're a mouthpiece for him. It just irked me. And that was one of the changes I was going to make as soon as I took over as editor of the newspaper. I said, we go out there and we cover the news. If there's news, there's great. It's great, but we're not going to be his mouthpiece. So he came in and he spoke to me, he brought his entourage in and everything, and he said, look, he said, we're just not getting the information out there anymore because you've always been there for me and for us. And I said, well, I appreciate that. I said, well, if you give us some news, I said, we'll be for you too. I said, but we don't want your propaganda. And I would say we kind of came to an understanding. And all of my editors came to an understanding about it also too, is that we go after the news. And that's it. We don't do what I refer to as doing our sources are solid by just being there and covering his news conferences, because I can't stand news conferences, to be honest with you. I always told folks is that if you're going to go cover a news conference, you best know what you're going to. Do your pre-reporting, see if we can pop something on the web before you get there. Don't go there and be spoon-fed. And I talked about that all the time, because it's easy for us to just show up. That's easy. That's easy for us to do, and to go cover something. But can you break that story before anyone else, before that news conference occurs? I had and I wondered about this here recently. Some of you may know Karl Malone, NBA Hall of Famer. Anyway, he was in town in Louisiana here recently, being honored from a Sweet 16 team or something like that. And they were talking to Karl on camera about some things, and he was talking about hiring all job candidates, anyone who graduates from Louisiana Tech, hire all of these job candidates. And then he said at the end of the clip, if you edit this, we're going to have a problem. So I wondered if the TV station actually allowed him to have his entire say, and they didn't edit the clip, because parts of it didn't make any sense. He talked about rat killings. I went back and looked at the video 3 times. Where did he get rat killings from talking about hiring Louisiana Tech grads? I wondered if the TV station backed down, because I would not have. And I think what they were probably, if they did, they probably were saying, hey, we want to keep that relationship built with this guy. But you can't do that. Here's another thing. You have to stand your ground. We had a mayor once, powerful guy. He said he was going to come in and clean up the gangs in the city. Very popular. Knew everybody. Owned a TV station there, sold it, made millions. But this guy was infatuated with being a police officer, being a police chief. He tried to board a plane once with TSA popped him. And he was always strapped. He walked around like he was law enforcement. Anyway, he had the gun, and TSA popped him. And he had a fake badge. He had an honorary badge. Law enforcement. And they said, this is not going to work. So, we broke that story. Oh, man, he was seething about it. He still insisted that he was law enforcement. He was he was a mayor of the city. But he really wanted to be the police chief. So anyway, when we broke that story, he came back and said our beat reporter was no longer welcome at anything at City Hall. Don't show up. You won't get into it in any news conferences or anything. He said, just give it up. So the reporter told me about it, and when I heard about the next news conference, I said, let's go. So we went over there, and I said, and I actually confronted Frank myself. I told him, I said, hey, Frank, do you have a minute? Can we chat? And the guy was secured because of the gang threats and everything. He had 2 armed police officers as his bodyguards also too. So they gave me an eagle eye and everything. And Frank wouldn't give me the time of day. But I said, okay, well, let me tell you something. So we ended up in the elevator. together, and we were going up. And I said, Frank, I understand you have a news conference. And the reporter was right there with me and everything. He wouldn't say anything. He still wouldn't say anything. And when I got upstairs, I said, Frank, if you're going to have a news conference, my reporter is going to be there. So just so you understand. Now, I said, if you want to hash this out some other kind of way, you can come to my office. My reporter stayed up there. And I told her, I said, we stand our ground. And I'm supporting you. Because you don't tell me who's going to cover City Hall. That's where you have to be tough and stand up to folks. We had a very, very powerful person who got really, really perturbed at me for not using her quote. Now, she had nothing, well, actually behind the scenes, she had a lot to do with this story. There was the police commissioner was resigning, and then there was someone at the legislature that was trying to pin some falsified timesheets on him, just to basically get him back going out the door. And this regional president, she was working behind the scenes to make sure that all of this kind of went away. So when we got the story that it actually was going away, the reporter got the tip from her, and then he also got like a canned quote from her. So before the story published, I had an editor to call me, and they read the quote to me and said, hey, Don, I want to run this past you because I don't think it's relevant. It doesn't say anything, so if it's okay, I'll take it out. I said, I trust you. Take it out. And I agreed with him. So we took the quote out, and man, you talk about fired up, mad. She lit me up later that night on the phone. She lit me up the next day, and she told me what for and everything else. But this wasn't the first time she's tried to do that. And I made it clear with her. I said, you don't make the decisions here at Newsday. You may make them where you are, but she was a VP. I said, but you don't make them here. And I said, we made a decision last night. We made a news judgment decision. So I'm going to ask you to respect it. She still wasn't going to respect it. Actually, she just had another run-in actually with the paper this past weekend. So that's never going to change. Social media. When to engage. Reporters used to be able to do this, actually, and were encouraged to actually engage with the public. At Newsday and most other organizations now, it's discouraged. One key to, also too, I will warn you guys also too, if you're posting things on social media and you're going to become a journalist, chances are you're going to get yourself in trouble. Because let me tell you what we did at Newsday. We had someone who was designated actually check people's social media accounts. To give an example, I had a reporter who just absolutely went unhinged on social media talking about the Trump administration. And he didn't think there was anything wrong with it. But one of the entities he covered was Veteran Affairs. Dealt with federal dollars. No matter. He shouldn't have been on there doing it. So be careful on what you post on social media. We're supposed to be right down the middle on everything we do. To avoid all of these ethical dilemmas, I have some tips for you. Do good journalism. Just do quality journalism. Do what we're supposed to do. Go out and report, break stories, make sure they're accurate, make sure they're clear, do not leave a doubt. Triple check. Most folks say double check your work. I say triple check it. Make sure you don't leave anything in doubt. You don't want any of your readers to be able to read anything between the lines. Always say, is it foolproof? Fair and balanced across the board. When people would ask me if I had an opinion about something, I'd say, no, I don't have an opinion. Is it fair and balanced? Did we reach all the people we were supposed to reach? Is it ready to go? If it's not ready to go, we hold it. We don't post it. Going back to attribution, if you steal it. I also wanted to, this is, if you go to that website also too, I thought those standards, the policies and standards of the Washington Post, if you guys get a chance, please go through that and read those because I thought they were very, very beneficial. When I looked around at different standards and policies around the country at various organizations, theirs stood out to me. So if you get a chance, please go take a look at them. They're ethical standards. Make sure you're free of conflict. We had some folks who wanted to participate in some events on Long Island that we said, no, you can't do it. As journalists, we have to stay neutral. And I will always ask people, do you have a conflict of interest? I had one editor who came to me when I was getting ready to promote her because she was so involved in the community. She had a list basically about this long of all the different organizations that she had something to do with. And I was kidding her. I said, I don't think I can promote you. I said, you can't do anything. And she was becoming our community's editor. And I said, I don't know what I'm going to do with you. But what I did is that I had her to actually just always bring up any of those ethical conflicts of interest, and let's talk about it and see if she can actually edit that story or not. So it worked out, and she has since been promoted again. But that's great, though. She's an editor who's very, very involved in the community. News versus opinion. As you can see, I was very focused there. That is that is the person, Rochelle, who replaced me as editor at Newsday. We work very well together. And I'll say one thing about Rochelle is that she's the new generation of journalists. She's the new generation. I brought her in specifically to lead our digital team. She is very, 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 very good at that. And that's the direction most organizations are headed. And I trained her up, and she's doing a great job so far as editor there. She came from the Chicago Tribune. She kind of reinvented herself also too as a digital person. So she was kind of self-taught in a lot of ways, and she kept growing and getting training, and that's where she is right now. The things people are going to always ask you, again, I'll go back to ask your opinion about things, and I'd always get readers to call me and they were trying to bait me and say, hey, what's your opinion on this? Because they had read a particular story in our publication, and they wanted to say, okay, you're biased. And I'd always come back, and my answer is that I don't have an opinion. And I always had to explain to them that I wasn't over the opinion pages. So if you become an editor, some of you will one day, you're going to run into that also too, because they all want to lump us all into one circle. We talked about social media. Never do a source a solid. Be really, really careful about that, because I had reporters in the past where they would get like quote fluff stories. Now, if they're good stories, they're really, really good stories, I think that's great to do. But if they're quote fluff stories and you're simply trying to do this to appease your source or sources, that doesn't work. We're not here to do anyone any favors. So please keep that in mind. You're here just simply to do your job. If it's a story, it's a story. But and that word solid is one reporter came back to me one day and said, I want to treat my source as solid. Is it a story? Stand your ground. Talk about that too. All right, next. All right, where are my speakers? There we go. All right, I'd like you guys to digest this for a second, actually, and just read through it. This is what others around the country, I reached out to some folks actually to see what they're thinking about ethics. These are key people in the industry. If you guys are looking for a job in the Jersey market, this is the person you turn to. Ronnie Agnew is the general manager there. NJ.com, which used to be the Newark Star Ledger, but it's all digital now. They have a good staff there, about 150 people. They pay well. It's a good organization. All right, what I've asked some of our students to give their interpretations of what these folks were talking about, their takeaways. So you want to get us started? Let me borrow that mic. Who has one mic? Thank you. You ready? These are takeaways from what others are saying.
Okay. From that, I just said that ethical journalism is important to like maintaining like public trust and also having a informed society. I think we're in a time where misinformation happens on a daily basis. And so I think it's really important for journalists to have integrity and also have accountability as well. So without these things, everyone will be like misinformed as a whole. I think these principles become even more important as social media and digital platforms become more prominent because people are taking things like fake news and just like running with it.
Excellent. Thank you. This is one of my former bosses, Rick Rosen, who was truly one of the best journalists I've ever worked with. Just a great news person. He has since retired and he is over student publications at Fordham now. He's working with the students over there. And he and I talk quite often. I learned so much from this gentleman. You guys are familiar with what the AP is going through right now as far as access. And I think there's been another development since they actually sued him. And you guys understand, I'm sure most of you know this was over the, quote, Gulf of America. And that is a form of bullying. And the AP wasn't going to take it, which they shouldn't. This is Rich's take right here. I really love this, what he had to say. Who's my next speaker?
Yeah, I mean, I think it just focuses a lot on how quality really needs to take precedent in so many situations with journalism, especially since like nowadays, more and more people get their information from not reliable sources online that have no verifiable data or sources or anything. I think it just really shows that, especially like with the White House case, that we need to keep quality journalists at the forefront of our coverage.
Thank you. And the part that stood out to me was the shoe leather reporting. I said, Rich, only you could come up with something like that. I really like it. I said, I'm going to borrow it. Rochelle replaced me at Newsday. Who's my next speaker? I'll get you a mic.
Yeah, so what Rochelle talks about here is about like what journalism really is about, covering what's important, covering the news, and not necessarily covering what politicians might want you to cover, like what you had talked about earlier with the like a politician that wanted you to cover what he said instead of what like you should take away from that. Like don't promote the propaganda, promote what's important about it. You can't have politicians strong arm these news organizations into like caving into what they want them to say. It's more about what people need to hear.
Thank you. Who has Glenn? Okay. don't have Glenn. Would anyone like to take a stab at it once you absorb it? Anyone? Your takeaway? I just want your takeaway from it. I know it's a lot. Glenn is a little long-winded, but that's okay.
All that, in journalism, you need to have your sources, you need to know the facts, you need to do your research. Without it, you don't have a story. You have a make-believe story. You need to fact check, double check, and if you don't know, then ask someone that knows.
Thank you. This was my takeaway from Glenn, and this stood out quite a bit to me, actually. This was telling. Now, I want you guys to really, really make note of this. We don't have self-beliefs as journalists. You can't at home. You can't at home. But in the office, in the workplace, about these different issues, any issues, actually, you need to be able to understand what you're covering, what we're reporting on. You need to become experts in those particular areas. That's why we always emphasize to folks when I had one guy, let me tell you, I had one reporter who I hired him as a cops reporter, well, as a communities person, and then I ended up moving him over to cops, and which was his strong suit. And then 3 months later, he said that I want to go to investigations. Like, really, seriously? I said, okay, I appreciate that, and I'm glad you're putting that bug in my ear. You know, he had maybe 3 years of experience, and he wanted to go to the investigative team. Good kid. Actually, he left me as a result of that because I wouldn't move him to investigations. My point here is that in order to develop expertise in what you do, you essentially have to spend some time on beats, learning them. If you want to go cover environment, you better learn it. If you want to go cover healthcare, you better learn it. And this doesn't happen overnight, and you can't do it in 3 or 6 months. You need to spend some time developing those beats, developing those sources, and you become an expert. Then you get to that next level. It's going to help you in terms of editing also too, with that expertise. It'll help you get to the next level. So I guess my point is that don't rush it. Don't rush what you're trying to do in your career. Because we have a tendency as young people, and I know I did, as a young person, I was antsy, man. I was going like, I'm ready. And then I saw on a performance review once from our corporate office, they labeled me as, quote, potential. It still puzzles me to this day. Why did they put potential on there? I don't know if it meant potential star, potential failure. I didn't know. But I used it actually as ammunition to basically say it was a chip on my shoulder. I said, I'll give you potential. But I worked my butt off and I listened to others in the industry and I tried to develop some expertise in different areas. So Glenn had some very good points here. All right, who has Camille? I wanted to bring a TV person in. Camille is someone I've mentored over the years, Michigan State grad. She made the transition from being, she was a reporter, she covered cops for me. Then she went to the St. Pete Times, became a takeout writer there, very, very talented. And then she made the transition over to TV, actually, because she wanted to try another medium. She's in Tampa working for CBS. Yes, go ahead.
I think it just highlights how important it is that news is always changing, and we have to be able to make those changes as the news, like as social media, and as we go about what we're writing about.
And this comes back to knowing your audience, because a lot of times we're out there trying to produce stuff and we don't know our audience. We may not have done a market study. we haven't been talking to our readers and viewers out there to actually get an idea of what they're talking about, or what they should be talking about, or what they're interested in. Because in the past, what we've done, I think, as an industry, is that we've cut those folks off because we always thought we knew better. This is what I'm going to give you, so you take it. So you know what they did? They dropped us. So if you're not listening to your audiences, and if you don't know, and you have to learn how to grow your audiences as well too. I've been saying that a lot here this week. We need innovative people with great ideas, creative ideas, moving forward in this business to help us grow audiences. To be able to actually put a product out there also too, that's going to be different and unique from what anybody else is doing. That's what we're always trying to think of some, what's next? When I worked at Newsday, we talked to all of these other different publications, from Boston to San Francisco, to Minneapolis, to Philadelphia. We had a circle of properties that we often, Dallas, hold Zooms with to try and, when we meet with the publishers, we meet with the editors, et cetera, and talk about what are you doing that's successful in your market. Trying to learn from others and sharing of information. So it's going to be on you guys to innovate. All right, who's my next person?
I think it kind of just speaks to how as a journalist, it's your job to figure out, what information your audience needs, and it's the best honor that you can give them to, cut straight through the facts. They're not here to read your opinion. They're here to get the news, and especially in, 2025, when a lot of news tends to lean one way or another. The greatest respect you can give to your readers is to just be as truthful and honest as possible.
Thank you. Which is, I want you guys to see that on what Ms. Henley had to say. Thank you. This is also one of my former bosses as well too. And she was, her niche was, she was an investigations editor. And pretty daggum good at it. So I learned an awful lot from her too. All right, folks. That's the end of my presentation. I'll take any questions. Oh, well, I won't. No, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Don. We're gonna set you up to 4 questions and answers here.
Okay.
Give us a bigger hand. So what's gonna happen now is we're gonna set up some mics in the room, and I'm gonna pull your chair there.
Okay.
I'll pull. And for a few minutes, I'll ask a question or two, but I think you guys are the ones who really should be asking questions. So feel free to step up to the stage. Come on, boss. Let's get this over with.
All right. Yes, sir.
Okay. So you heard a lot, been giving a lot of pointers. I'm going to do the dirty thing here. Say, Don Hudson, what is the greatest takeaway I should get from your presentation?
Accuracy, fair and balanced coverage, and do journalism the right way. Accuracy, truth, going after the truth. Being aggressive, also too, as journalists, never backing down, because we have a job to do. Help preserve our rights.
All right, now, I'm going to reach back into the bag and ask you a question. What should journalists, or do they have biases, and how do they deal with those?
Yeah, I think there's no doubt about that. And I think everyone think most folks in this room would probably agree that there are biases. But you have to, as I said, when you walk in that door, it has to be a clean slate. You have to push everything to the side because you have a job to do. It's a responsibility. It's all about, it's journalism principles and ethics and standards, and holding yourself to those standards and holding your coworkers to those standards, holding your editor to those standards.
I'm a young reporter or just young graduate. I'm getting ready to look for a job. What is the ethical thermometer I should be using to determine what's a good place to work at or not?
I think you do your research on the different organizations, and because media ownership has changed so much over the years. Professor Millbrook and I were talking about that yesterday. We're going like, who owns that publication again? So it's hard to actually remember now because it changes like constantly. So do your research. And I always encourage people also to, and most folks do, call, find someone within that organization and ask, what kind of a work environment do you have there? Is it aggressive? Is it the type of environment that you actually want to go into? So more than anything, just do your research. Now, some of us may just have to get in the door first, just to learn some things, and then just to get to that next spot. That's okay. Just don't develop any bad habits. The things that you learn here at this university, take them away and make sure you keep them for the rest of your careers. Especially the ethical things. Everything involving ethics.
Keep in mind that the mics are open, so I can keep going forever. If you guys want to ask questions, feel free to come up. Don't be shy. Go for it.
As a person of color, how is it working within the journalism field? And I have another one. What are your thoughts on cancel culture? Both loaded things, but
As a journalist of color, my thoughts there, how tough it was to get in, how tough it was in this field.
yeah.
Very, very tough. Very, very tough because usually and Professor Millbrook, he knows what I'm talking about. Usually you get to organizations and they pretty much tell you there is a ceiling. This is only as far as you're going to go. And you really, really have to work hard at it. Now, when I got the job at Newsday, everyone was going like, oh man, you're the first black editor we've ever had and everything. And I said, that is great. And I'm proud of that moment, but let me tell you something. If I didn't know what I was doing, I wouldn't have gotten that job. And I wasn't going to keep it either. So you have to work doubly as hard. As Dean Baquet told me, the retired editor of the New York Times, he told me, he said, and when I called to ask him advice on how to effectively run my newsroom, he gave me some really good pointers. And then, but the main thing he told me, he said, it stuck with me. He says, Don, once you get to the top as a person of color, there's no one else to talk to. He said, I turned around and looked around and I couldn't find anyone else at that level to talk to. So he said, that's why I'm offering you. I'm offering to you to call me anytime you need.
And what are your thoughts on cancel culture within at least Generation Z definitely has that big in media at least, and how do you navigate that with journalism as well? Because sometimes, a celebrity does something or a prominent political figure, it could be misguided and they're canceled within the social media grounds, and that's perceived negatively in how the generation looks at journalism too. So what are your thoughts on cancel culture itself?
I don't know. I'm going to turn that back around on you and tell me your thoughts.
Well, cancel culture, in the beginning, it was to point out organizations that were doing wrong to their employees. And then it slowly changed throughout time within social media to be more towards if a celebrity, it doesn't even have to be Oscar-winning celebrity. It could be an influencer even could get canceled, meaning that they could no longer have the reputation or their platform because they had done something wrong. But the news outlets that are showing that, like TMZ, that are more social media outlets, are perceiving, anything that happens to this influencer or celebrity or whoever in a negative light, that it could be half true, but it also could be from these headlines, people are perceiving it wrong. And so within Gen Z, I know I've talked about it to other people about what are your thoughts on it? Because at first it was not a movement that started to cancel celebrities, cancel influencers. It started to point out companies that were doing wrong to their employees. That's how cancel culture started, when I looked into it at least. I could be wrong, but the floor is open to anyone who wants to talk about it too.
I think you answered the question.
Yeah, I guess so.
No, you did.
Well, I'm hogging the mic, so I'm gonna go.
Hey, how's it going? I guess I would just ask, the profession and field of journalism can feel intimidating at times. Just considering all the guidelines you have to stick to. I'm not saying it should be particularly challenging, but you have to keep a lot of things in mind in order to not mess up as exhibited by this lecture. So I guess the question I would ask is, what about your work excites you and keeps you going and keeps that stress of the job worthwhile? And what should a group of rising journalists look forward to feeling in the profession?
It's making a difference within your community. Righting wrongs, and it's that adrenaline every single day, because you know what you're doing actually is important. It's extremely important work because you're doing something that you've been trained to do that no one else in the country has been trained to do. You can deliver news and information every single day, and every word counts. That's the one thing you have to keep in mind too. Every single word counts. One wrong word can get you sued and can cost you your job. But I never came in fearful or scared. I came in ready to have fun. Actually, let's go do journalism.
Thank you.
And on that topic, you started off in sports, with the news. What was the thinking behind that, or what was the driving force behind that change?
Well, the driving force is essentially, again, I wanted to go into broadcast journalism. I wanted to become the next Brian Gumbel. So that was my goal in life. But I veered off, actually, and I did it early to go into print and digital. And then I moved to the news. I started in sports, and it was great because it taught me how to make a deadline. It made me tough. It took me all over the place to cover different events and chase athletes and to break stories there. And then after that, I said, okay, it's time for me. If I'm going to move into management, you're going to have to learn news. And that's what I did. I went into news, and then by the time I finished my career, I've been through just about every department other than features.
Awesome, thanks. I also wanted to ask super quick, did you ever cover the Long Island artist Biz Markie throughout your tenure, or no?
No, I did not cover.
Okay, he wasn't making the Billy Joel section.
No.
Okay, thank you.
But he did make our presentation.
Hi, I wanted to ask, how do you balance quality journalism with fast journalism, and then relatedly, being a for-profit organization, like you need to make money with balanced journalism?
Journalism is journalism. I mean, essentially, it doesn't matter. If you're producing it, should be quality. Now, the for-profit part of it, you mean like the Marshall Project and?
Well, just like needing to, make money, have subscribers, and whatnot with balanced journalism, or just what have you had to deal with in that regard, or just general advice you have about that?
I think the nonprofits actually are good. I mean, good opportunities for folks, especially a lot of these digital startups that are nonprofits and everything too, because they do really, really quality journalism. If you look at, and I don't know if you guys, or some of you probably not, but if you look at Mississippi Today, which started, okay, we're familiar right here. It has turned out to be just one great publication, digital publication. They have a reporter there. I know she's won one. She may have won two Pulitzers. And okay, so you guys know what I'm talking about. Anyway, but I'm talking, and that's a nonprofit. And it started out with really not much of anything. And now they've got a really, really strong crew of reporters there. So these nonprofits, you have one in Baltimore, the Baltimore Banner is doing extremely well. They're popping up all across the country as alternatives, and they are very, very good opportunities. If you get in with one that's credible, Because a lot of these publications are led by people who have come from the LA Times. They've come from these major metropolitan organizations. There's some really good there's 2 really good startups in Houston. So they're all across the country.
Cool, thank you.
I think the question he's getting at too is from the perspective of a big newspaper. Those startups, are you a pain in the ass? How do you deal with that?
Well, if you're doing your job, they wouldn't be a pain in the ass. Because they're starting up in markets where folks are not doing their jobs. Houston is fine, but they've cut so much in some of these markets. That's the thing. That's why they started up as alternatives. We didn't have them. We didn't have them on that. We would have run them off on that.
Go ahead.
My question was, throughout your career, how have you dealt with people who maybe have had a hard time hearing perspectives other than their own? Like somebody that's very closed-minded or maybe comes off as ignorant or ignores facts.
You mean in terms of sources or?
Yeah, like a source, for example.
You deal with them as best you possibly can, and you respectfully agree to disagree with them. And when they continue to come at you and say, "Look, I've had to hang up on people before. I'm not gonna continue this conversation." So, and that's because they're just simply not going to change their mindset.
Yeah.
And then sometimes you end up just cutting them off. I had a way of blocking people from emails. My IT system showed me how to do it. Certain people.
Speaking of ethics, I'm a journalism student. Is it okay that I recorded this session of your speak? If I don't have your permission, I can delete all these recordings.
I don't know what is the
It's the
state law says.
This was a public session.
So it's fine. I just thought on the topic of ethics, might as well just ask.
This
in
was
case.
very good, very good.
I appreciate you asking.
Your professor is very proud of you. All right.
She's smiling somewhere.
In New York, you only have to have one permission, and that's yourself.
Oh.
To record.
So in your point of view, do you think the decline of print media affected investigative journalism?
Print media? I would say, yeah, I could say that yes, because we've lost a lot of people, a lot of very good investigative reporters throughout our industry. So there's no doubt about that, and the print products continue to dwindle across the country. They're still fairly strong in this region, in this area. Maybe not totally in Pennsylvania, but I know in the Northeast and North.
And also my second question was, in class, we're talking about the tension between public service and also the need to remain profitable. How do you, and also Newsday, balance the need for having compelling headliners, but also having being a responsible journalist as well?
Well, you don't want sensational headlines. They need to be strong, what we refer to as SEO headlines that will get your attention. One thing also too that in these headlines also too, we never as journalists would put full names in them, but now in SEO headlines they encourage you to do the full name, mainly for the Google search and all of that. So does that answer your question?
Not really.
That's okay. All right. Well, all right. Not really. Okay.
But I don't know. I was just trying to figure out, is there what makes a story that that you publish? I would say, how do you separate this actually something that you want to publish, something that this is regular I don't know gossip or something like that.
Well, if it's speculation, if it's rumor, you don't publish it. We didn't. You had to be able to nail it. It had to be accurate, and you had to be on the money. So, that's basic journalism.
Right. Thank you.
So, and on that note, I'm going to ask one last question related to circulation things. You said earlier this week in a session with one of the students that you don't share stories that Newsday published. Somebody one of the people in the story wanted you to send them a copy of the story, and you wouldn't send it to them.
That is correct.
What is the logic of that, and How should we follow in that, whatever theory you're coming up with?
Well, I mean, I think that varies from organization to organization. What I was basically saying is that the only thing we would do is share the link. So you can go to the website. We're not gonna send you a PDF of it or anything like that. No, we're chasing subscribers. I'm sorry, we're not giving away content. And that's just been the company, that was the company's policy. We just didn't give it away. And if they were interested in it enough, then they would go, all you do is click on it and you pay $1 for the first 3 months or whatever, you know, if you were really interested in it. We wanted to drive subscriptions. That's why we do what we do.
And you made that a part of the staff. Staff was told they couldn't send stories.
Yeah, we had a few that would try to slip a few PDFs
Just curious.
on social media there and we flag them.
On that note, I'm going to say thank you, Mr. Hudson. I hope you learned something. He'll be around for the next day or so if you want to catch